Imagine this. On a quiet, moonless night, a respected sheriff in Dallas takes a young, rising actress to a secluded beach house. What was meant to be an escape turns into something much darker. A heated argument erupts. A life is lost. And when the police arrive, they find a scene too brutal to comprehend. But one thing stands out. Nolan Draxton, the man sworn to uphold the law, is eerily calm. What could drive a man, a trusted protector, to commit such a horrifying crime? But here's the twist. Nolan's past is about to unravel in a way no one expected. Stay with us as we uncover the chilling truth behind the sheriff's descent into darkness, the secrets he's tried to bury, and the deadly consequences of his obsession. Nolan Draxton, a 45-year-old sheriff in Dallas, was a man whose past never seemed to stay buried for long. Standing tall at 5 feet 11 inches, his broad shoulders and chiseled jawline might fool some into thinking that he was a man who had it all together. His weathered face told the story of someone hardened by years of service. But beneath that tough, commanding exterior was a man perpetually haunted by the shadows of his past. The pain from childhood loss and the deep scars of growing up in a world that never truly offered him a chance had shaped him into someone who rarely showed weakness. But it was that very weakness, buried deep inside, that Nolan kept hidden from the world. Born to a hopeful and ambitious salesman in Dallas, Nolan's early life should have been one of promise. But everything changed in 1987 when his father invested everything they had into the promising Texaco oil company. The investment failed spectacularly, and the financial ruin that followed was a crushing blow. Nolan's father, once a proud man with a confident smile, spiraled into depression. The man who had once filled their home with laughter was now broken, disconnected, and lost. Nolan watched helplessly as his father's spirit withered away, unable to cope with the shame of losing everything. 2 years later, his father died, victim to the weight of his failures. How could a child even begin to understand the loss of a parent, let alone the total collapse of their world? Was Nolan's father always destined to fail, or was it the crushing weight of that singular loss that turned him into someone unrecognizable? At just 9 years old, Nolan's life was ripped apart for good. His mother had passed away shortly after giving birth to him, leaving him with no true foundation. When Nolan's father lost everything, there was no one left to care for him. He was tossed into foster care, a system that was supposed to offer protection, but often failed children like him. Nolan found himself in a series of broken homes, each more dysfunctional than the last. He was sent from one cold, indifferent house to another, experiencing neglect and physical abuse that would leave scars, both visible and invisible, that would shape every part of his being. Some nights, he was sent to bed without food, his cries unheard, his pain dismissed. What does it do to a child when they're abandoned by the only people who should love them? How does a broken system mold a young heart that only craves the simplest kind of care? But despite everything, there was a sliver of hope in Nolan's life. After 18 months in foster care, a family desperate to adopt a child took him in. Their love wasn't perfect, but it was real, and for the first time, Nolan felt the faintest glimmer of normalcy. The adoption gave him stability, a chance to rebuild, to find some semblance of peace. He eventually excelled in school and later graduated college at the top of his class. Something few would have expected of a boy with such a troubled beginning. Can the darkness of a childhood ever truly be erased? Or do the ghosts of the past follow you forever? Could Nolan truly escape the emotional devastation left by those years? Arden Everly, a 16-year-old actress, was a rising star in Dallas, Texas. From the outside, her life appeared flawless. Born into a loving family of 4, Arden had everything a girl could wish for. Her mother, a sharp and successful lawyer, had always been there to guide her, while her father, a hard-working construction worker, had shown her the value of resilience and dedication. Arden's family loved her dearly and supported her in everything she did. She never had to worry about money, about food, or about being left alone to the world. She was the perfect example of a privileged teenager with a bright future. But behind her sparkling smile, there was something more, something that only those closest to her knew. Since she was 11, Arden had dreamed of becoming an actress. She discovered her talent at an early age, performing in her local church's Christmas play, where her powerful voice and natural stage presence captivated everyone in the audience. It was there, under the bright stage lights, that Arden realized acting was her calling. By 14, she had already landed roles in local theater productions, and her charm and beauty made heads turn everywhere she went. Her growing fame in Dallas was no accident. She had the kind of beauty that made heads turn, tall, with striking features and an effortless grace that left a lasting impression. But it was her vulnerability, her ability to connect with people on a deep emotional level, that made her a star. How much pressure does it take for a young girl to live up to the world's expectations, all while trying to figure out who she really is? Could fame really bring the fulfillment she had always dreamed of, or would it leave her feeling more isolated than ever? Nolan Draxton's life, despite his successes, had become predictable. He lived alone in a modest house near the outskirts of Dallas, dedicated to his job, but haunted by his past. He rarely ventured out beyond his responsibilities and his duties as a sheriff. One fateful Saturday afternoon, as he wandered the aisles of a local supermarket, picking up his usual groceries, his eyes fell on someone who would change the course of his life forever. Arden Everly was standing near the produce section, laughing with her friends. She was radiant, so different from the troubled women Nolan had known in his past. Her presence was magnetic, and in that fleeting moment, Nolan felt a pull that he couldn't explain, something deep within him stirring for the first time in years. His gaze lingered a moment too long, and as if feeling it, Arden looked up, her eyes locking with his. Their brief exchange was simple, just a smile, a fleeting moment in time, but it marked the beginning of something darker. What started as a simple, innocent conversation over fruit soon led to a quiet dinner invitation from Nolan. He didn't realize it then, but that single moment would set off a chain of events that neither of them could stop. Was it fate that brought them together, or was it the beginning of something far more dangerous than either could imagine? Could Nolan have resisted the temptation to connect with someone so innocent, or was this collision with Arden inevitable? As Nolan and Arden's relationship grew, things began to change, slowly at first, like a creeping tide. Nolan was no longer just a sheriff. He was something else, something darker, something that threatened to undo everything he had worked so hard to rebuild. And for Arden, the act of trusting Nolan in a world that often seemed so empty was both a dream and a nightmare. Could the young actress, with all her beauty and fame, have known that the man she was getting closer to harbored such darkness within? And as Nolan's past resurfaced in the most violent ways, could Arden have possibly seen the storm approaching before it was too late? Behind closed doors, things weren't as they seemed. Nolan's tragic childhood, filled with emotional scars, had shaped him into a man who couldn't shake the demons of his past. Arden, too, found herself spiraling into a world she didn't fully understand. What began as a simple affair became something that both of them would come to regret. But little did they know, this innocent relationship, an actor looking for an escape, a sheriff looking for redemption, was about to turn into a deadly game. The price they would both pay would be far higher than either could ever imagine. What happens when the past catches up with you, and your secrets are no longer yours to keep? What lengths would Nolan go to protect the one thing in his life that made him feel alive again? Would Arden be able to break free before the darkness swallowed them both? Welcome to True Crimes Unlimited, where the darkest secrets meet the brightest minds. I'm your host, and I'll be guiding you to the most shocking, the most disturbing, and most fascinating true crime stories from around the world. From the twisted minds of serial killers to the intricate webs of deceit, we'll dive into the depths of human nature and explore the crimes that will leave you speechless. And as we unravel the mysteries, you'll be drawn into a world of intrigue, suspense, and fascination. So, if you're ready to delve into the unknown, to confront the darkness, and uncover the truth, then join me on this journey into the world of true crime. Subscribe now, and let's uncover the secrets together. It all began with a whisper, a secret affair between Nolan Draxton, a seasoned sheriff from Dallas, and the young, beautiful actress Arden Everly. To the outside world, their relationship seemed innocent. Nothing more than a fleeting connection between a man twice her age and a girl seeking solace in the pressures of fame. But behind closed doors, the truth was much darker. Arden, overwhelmed by the relentless demands of stardom, found an unexpected refuge in Nolan. She craved the comfort he offered, the sense of security in his arms. But Nolan, carrying the weight of his unresolved trauma, found in Arden a deeper fixation. She wasn't just a young actress to him. She became an anchor, a way to fill the gaping emptiness inside him. And as their affair progressed, Nolan's obsession with her deepened. The night they met at the beach house was supposed to be a simple escape, a retreat from their complicated lives. Nolan had taken Arden to a beach house he frequented during the summer. It was secluded, peaceful, the kind of place where secrets could be kept without the prying eyes of the city. They shared dinner, exchanged laughter, and for a brief moment, it felt like a normal relationship, far from the chaos of their lives. But beneath the calm facade, things were already unraveling. Nolan's demons, his unresolved pain, his anger, and the fear of losing the one person who had made him feel alive again, began to surface. As the evening wore on, a small argument ignited a fire that would end in catastrophe. It was a sudden eruption, words spoken in anger, insults thrown in haste, things said that couldn't be taken back. What started as a simple disagreement between two people who were already walking a thin line quickly escalated into something much more dangerous. Nolan, in a fit of rage, lost control. The violent confrontation turned deadly. Arden Everly, the rising star, was left lying in a pool of her own blood, her life snuffed out in an instant. The scene was gruesome. Her body sprawled across the floor of Nolan's beach house, the once vibrant actress now lifeless. The walls of the house, once echoing with their laughter, were now silent witnesses to a brutal crime. How did things escalate so quickly? Was this a moment of blind rage, or was Nolan's deepening obsession with Arden the true catalyst of this tragic turn of events? Could their heated argument have been a trigger for something that Nolan had been trying to suppress for years? After the murder, Nolan didn't panic. Not at first. He stared at Arden's body, his breath shallow and his mind racing, but he remained eerily calm. He knew what needed to be done. The man who swore to protect Dallas was now the man who would try to cover up a murder. Nolan carefully staged the scene, trying to make it appear as though something had gone terribly wrong in the heat of their argument. He wiped down the area, collected the evidence, and, with a chilling level of composure, fled the scene. The sheriff knew the ins and outs of the law, and he was determined to make this disappear. But there was one thing he hadn't anticipated. The beach house wasn't as secluded as he thought. The next morning, a couple, newly in love, eager to escape the bustle of the city, ventured to the beach to explore. They had heard whispers of a hidden getaway, a place where you could find peace. It wasn't long before they arrived at Nolan's beach house, hoping to find it unoccupied, a chance to have a quiet day near the water. But as they approached the house, a foul stench hit them, a smell that made their stomachs churn. Something was wrong. They hesitated at first, unsure they should enter, but curiosity won over. Inside, they found the crime scene, the lifeless body of Arden still lying in the same position Nolan had left her. The air was thick with the stench of death. Shocked and terrified, the couple quickly ran out of the house and dialed 911. The call was frantic, the voice trembling as they reported what they had found. Within minutes, police arrived at the scene. But by then, Nolan had vanished, leaving only the haunting evidence of what had transpired the night before. How did Nolan think he could escape such a brutal act? Was he truly confident that his meticulous cover-up would work, or was he trying to outrun the inevitable? What did the couple's discovery mean for the investigation? Could they have been the key to uncovering the truth? As the police arrived and began their investigation, they quickly found themselves tangled in a web of possibilities. At first, all evidence pointed to Nolan Draxton. The sheriff's alibi was weak, and his calm demeanor in the face of Arden's death raised suspicions. But as detectives combed through the evidence, they realized that there were others who had been connected to Arden, each with their own motives for wanting her gone. There was Matthew Fields, the obsessive fan who had followed Arden for years. He had attended every public appearance she made, and his obsession with her had bordered on unhealthy. His behavior had been erratic in the weeks leading up to her death. Could Matthew have followed her to the beach house that night? Perhaps even encountered Nolan and Arden? Did his twisted infatuation with Arden drive him to murder? Then there was Eric Thornton, a fellow actor and co-star who had worked closely with Arden. Their chemistry on screen had sparked rumors of an off-screen romance, and many believed that Eric was secretly in love with her. But when Arden became involved with Nolan, Eric's jealousy grew. Was his jealousy strong enough to drive him to murder? Could he have been lurking in the shadows that night, watching them both? Nolan's own past also became a source of suspicion. His traumatic childhood, marked by abuse and loss, was no secret. Had these deep-seated scars finally caught up with him? Could the rage he had buried for so many years have manifested in this act of violence? Or was there something more, something Nolan had hidden even deeper than anyone realized? Could the true culprit be someone other than Nolan? Someone hiding in plain sight? What if the obsessive fan, the jealous co-star, or even Nolan's own fractured mind were responsible for Arden's death? The investigation deepened, with detectives uncovering more troubling clues. Nolan's disappearance wasn't as seamless as he had hoped. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station revealed a man who matched Nolan's description, fleeing from the area in a dark car. But the more they searched for Nolan, the more questions emerged. Why was he so calm? Why had he covered up the murder so meticulously? Was Nolan truly the perpetrator, or was he being framed for something far worse than anyone could imagine? The police also discovered a series of unsettling texts between Nolan and Arden in the days leading up to her death. These messages were not just flirtations, but something darker, words of control, manipulation, and obsession. Nolan had become increasingly possessive of Arden, and it seemed that the more she pushed away, the more he pulled her in. He had threatened her once before in a moment of anger, and those threats were starting to make sense now. As the detectives pieced together the timeline, they uncovered a crucial piece of evidence. A phone call made by Nolan the night of the murder. It wasn't to his colleagues or anyone involved in the case. It was to someone from his past, a shadowy figure with ties to Nolan's childhood, someone who had been part of the very trauma that Nolan had spent his life trying to bury. Could Nolan's past be the key to unlocking the mystery? Had his long-buried history led Arden's murder? Or was there another person manipulating the strings in this web of lies and betrayal? The police investigation began with urgency, but quickly became mired in uncertainty. Detectives combed through the beach house, searching for any piece of evidence that could lead them to a definitive conclusion. Nolan Draxton was a respected sheriff in Dallas, a man known for his professionalism and his commitment to the law. But as the hours turned into days, doubts started to emerge. Could the man entrusted with upholding the law be hiding a dark side, a side so buried, so carefully concealed, that even those closest to him had no idea? The scene at the beach house was chilling. Arden's body was discovered by a couple who had simply come to explore the beach. The police arrived, took statements, and began their work. But the more they gathered evidence, the more questions arose. The couple, shaken by what they had stumbled upon, had no idea what they were walking into when they went to the beach that morning. When they dialed 911, they were unaware that they had just opened a Pandora's box that would unravel the life of one of Dallas' most trusted lawmen. The first clue in the investigation came from a neighbor who reported hearing loud, heated arguments coming from Nolan's beach house the night of Arden's death. The argument had been so intense that it was audible from several yards away, despite the isolation of the house. The neighbor was unclear on what had been said, but the sound of raised voices, followed by eerie silence, stuck with them. Was this a typical argument between two lovers, or did it signal something far more dangerous? A tragic turning point in their relationship? But it wasn't just the argument that raised suspicions. As detectives began to dig into Arden's life, they discovered something unsettling, a series of cryptic phone calls between Nolan and Arden in the days leading up to her death. These weren't just casual text or phone chats between lovers. These were fraught conversations that hinted at something darker. One call stood out in particular, where Nolan's voice was laced with despair. "There's a darkness inside me, Arden," he confessed. "It's always been there. It's not something I can control anymore." What was Nolan talking about? What darkness had been hiding inside him all this time? Was this a man grappling with his own demons? Or was it a warning, a glimpse into something much more dangerous? The more they listened to the recordings, the clearer it became. Nolan's troubled past wasn't just something he had buried. It was something that had followed him, threatening to surface at the worst possible moment. Could the sheriff's hidden demons have driven him to kill? Or was Arden's death the tragic result of a toxic, obsessive relationship? As the investigation deepened, the detectives uncovered something even more chilling. A former foster child of Nolan's came forward. This person, now an adult, revealed startling details about Nolan's troubled childhood. The horrors Nolan had experienced in the foster care system were more brutal than anyone had imagined. The former foster child spoke of physical abuse, neglect, and emotional scars that Nolan had carried for years. Scars that, according to the witness, were never fully healed. This new revelation cast a shadow over Nolan's life, and his history began to take on new significance. Was this abuse the root of Nolan's unraveling? Could his trauma have finally caught up with him, pushing him over the edge? Could the man who had served his community for so long now be capable of committing such a horrific act? As detectives continued to piece together the clues, it became evident that Nolan's past was not just a backdrop to the investigation. It was potentially the key to understanding what had happened that night. Nolan had suffered tremendously as a child, and the long-term effects of that trauma were becoming harder to ignore. Could the years of neglect, the abuse he endured in foster care, and the constant fear of abandonment have led him to murder? But something didn't add up. Nolan's behavior at the scene of the crime had been odd, almost too calm, as though he'd been expecting this moment for years. Was this just a man who had finally snapped, or was there something more sinister at play? The evidence kept pointing toward Nolan, but each piece of information brought with it even more questions. Had he killed Arden in a blind rage, driven by his unresolved demons? Or was there a third party involved, someone else who had manipulated Nolan's fragile state of mind? As the detectives dug deeper, they uncovered more unsettling evidence. Nolan had left the beach house in a hurry, and security footage from a nearby gas station showed a man, matching Nolan's description, speeding away from the area the morning after the murder. But Nolan had gone to great lengths to cover his tracks. He knew the ins and outs of the law, the ways to escape scrutiny. Could he have been covering for someone else? Or was he truly the one responsible for Arden's death? Could Nolan really be hiding a much darker truth than anyone realized? Or was he being set up by someone who knew his weaknesses? As the investigation continues to unfold, new revelations and chilling twists keep the detectives and the public on edge. With Nolan's troubled past coming to light, the question remains: could his deep-seated trauma have been the catalyst for this murder? Or is there someone else pulling the strings, manipulating the sheriff's fragile mind? What do you think? Does the evidence point to Nolan, or is there a deeper conspiracy at play? Could someone from his past, or even someone close to Arden, be behind this tragedy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The investigation reached a boiling point when forensic evidence finally began to connect Nolan Draxton to Arden Everly's murder. Forensic scientists found traces of DNA that were undeniably linked to Nolan. DNA found under Arden's fingernails, the marks of a desperate struggle between the two. But that wasn't all. The evidence pointed to something far more damning. Blood-stained clothing belonging to Nolan was recovered, with traces of Arden's blood mixed into the fibers. The pieces were falling into place, and detectives were no longer questioning whether Nolan was involved. They were now questioning just how far his involvement went. But the most chilling revelation came not from the physical evidence, but from Nolan himself. In a private moment, as the weight of the evidence mounted, Nolan finally cracked. In a quiet, almost defeated tone, he confessed, "I didn't mean to kill her. I just couldn't stop myself." It was like the past took over. He admitted to the crime, but his confession was laced with confusion, as though he wasn't entirely sure he was confessing to murder or to the darkness that had haunted him for years. The room fell silent as Nolan's confession echoed in the ears of the detectives. For a moment, it seemed as if the case was solved. Nolan Draxton, the sheriff, had killed Arden Everly in a fit of rage, driven by his trauma and obsessive behavior. It was the simplest explanation, but it didn't feel like the whole story. Could a man's past really be enough to drive him to commit such a heinous crime? Or was there something more lurking in Nolan's psyche? Something even darker than anyone realized? Just when investigators thought they had everything figured out, new information began to emerge, throwing the case back into turmoil. Nolan's alibi, which had been one of the last pieces of his defense, began to crumble. The time he had claimed to be at the beach house was inconsistent with the timeline of Arden's death. In fact, multiple witnesses had come forward, each reporting seeing Nolan in different places than he had described. The inconsistencies didn't stop there. His strange behavior during questioning also raised new questions. Nolan's calm, almost attached demeanor throughout the investigation seemed too rehearsed. There were moments when he appeared to withdraw into himself, his gaze distant, as though he were not fully present. Why wasn't he reacting like a man who had just confessed a murder? Why was he still withholding key details of that night? And why, when faced with overwhelming evidence, did Nolan seem more interested in protecting someone or something else? Could Nolan be lying about the details of the crime? What is he hiding? Could there be more to his confession than meets the eye? As the detectives continued to dig, they discovered even more twists. Nolan's connection to the beach house was deeper than they had initially thought. It wasn't just a secluded getaway. It was a place he had returned to repeatedly throughout his life, a place tied to memories from his troubled childhood. Could the location itself have been the trigger for Nolan's breakdown? Had the beach house become a symbol of everything he had lost, a place where his trauma had come to a boiling point? Why did Nolan insist on using the beach house as his escape? What role did this place play in the death of Arden? And was it truly just a random location for crime, or was it much more personal to Nolan than anyone realized? But then, just when everyone thought they had the case figured out, a twist came that no one expected. Nolan Draxton was not just a sheriff with troubled past. He was a man on the edge, pushed over by the weight of his history and the demons he had never confronted. The investigation revealed something no one had anticipated. Nolan's relationship with Arden wasn't merely the result of a fleeting affair. It was deeply tied to his past trauma. Arden reminded him of something, someone, a figure from his childhood, a mother, a woman he had lost long ago. Nolan's obsession with Arden wasn't just about love or control. It was about reliving a past that he couldn't escape. Detectives uncovered letters Nolan had written, buried deep in his personal belongings. Letters that he had never sent, filled with confessions and guilt about his own childhood and the abandonment he had suffered. The more they read, the clearer it became. Nolan saw Arden as a symbol of everything he had lost, a chance for redemption, a chance to fix the wounds that had festered for years. And when he saw her drifting away, when she seemed to pull back from him, Nolan's obsessive behavior took a deadly turn. Could Nolan have been projecting his own unresolved grief on Arden? Was she, in his mind, a replacement for something or someone he had lost long ago? But the final bombshell wasn't just about the crime. It was about the shocking truth behind it all. Nolan's dark past wasn't just a key to the murder. It was the reason he had been slowly unraveling for years. The investigation revealed that Nolan had been secretly battling with his inner demons for a long time, unable to let go of the trauma from his childhood. His violent outbursts, his obsession with Arden, were just the surface of a much deeper problem, one that had been simmering beneath his calm exterior. Nolan's story wasn't just about a man who lost control in the heat of passion. It was about a man who had been shattered long before the murder ever took place, a man who had spent his entire life running from the pain of his past. The truth wasn't just about what happened that night at the beach house. It was about the truth of Nolan Draxton himself, a man who had been living with a mask for years, a man who had convinced the world and himself that he was in control, but in the end, it was his trauma that had finally broken him. Could anyone have seen this coming? Was Nolan always doomed to repeat the mistakes of his past? Or was the murder of Arden the result of a single, irreversible moment of madness? What do you think? Did Nolan's dark past truly lead him to commit this murder, or was he manipulated by something or someone else? Could there be more layers to the story than we've uncovered so far? Let us know your theories and thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done if you were in Nolan's shoes? Would you have seen the signs of unraveling, or was this a tragedy that was waiting to happen? The truth may be darker than we realize, but we want to hear your thoughts. Nolan Draxton's life, once filled with honor and respect, came crashing down as the truth about Arden Everly's murder spread like wildfire through Dallas. The sheriff, a man who had spent years building a reputation as a protector of the law, was now exposed as the very thing he swore to fight against. The betrayal was too much for the community to bear. The shock of it all left the people of Dallas in disbelief. How could the sheriff, the trusted figure who had once stood as a symbol of strength, be capable of such darkness? It wasn't just the murder of an innocent girl. It was a destruction of the very trust that had held the community together. Nolan's carefully crafted image was shattered beyond repair. Meanwhile, Arden's family was left in devastation. Her parents, who had always been proud of their daughter's success, now faced an unfathomable loss. They had lost not only their child, but the future they had dreamed of for her. The dreams of watching Arden thrive in her career, her life unfolding with love and success, had been brutally ripped away. The pain of losing her was a wound that would never heal. The questions left unanswered, the whys and how could this happen, would haunt them forever. No amount of justice could bring Arden back, and nothing could erase the cruelty of her untimely death. Can anyone truly escape the weight of their past? Was Nolan a victim of his own trauma, or was he simply a man who had fallen too far into the darkness? The consequences were clear. Nolan had been taken into custody, his once promising career destroyed, and his future as a lawman gone. But the real question remained, at what cost had all of this come? Could Nolan have ever escaped the grip of his childhood demons, or was he doomed from the start? As the dust settled, there were no easy answers. Nolan's life, his legacy, was forever tarnished. But the most haunting part of the story wasn't just a murder. It was the man Nolan had become. He was no longer the sheriff people had once trusted. His descent into darkness had been slow, a lifetime of emotional scars finally catching up with him in the most devastating way possible. For Nolan, there would be no redemption, no way to undo what had been done. The questions that lingered were heartbreaking. Could anyone have helped Nolan before it was too late? Could someone have recognized the signs of his unraveling, or was he destined to spiral into madness? Had he ever truly been in control of his own fate, or was he simply a product of his troubled past? And what about the people who trusted him, his colleagues, his friends? How could they reconcile the man they thought they knew with the monster who committed such a heinous crime? Was Nolan's fall from grace inevitable, or was it the result of a tragic series of events that could have been avoided? The case was closed, and Nolan was sentenced, but the scars of this tragedy remained, etched into the minds of everyone affected. Nolan Draxton's story was one of downfall and destruction, but it was also a cautionary tale, one that begged question. How many people walk around every day, carrying away their unresolved pain, not knowing how close they are breaking? For Nolan, there would be no redemption. The man he once was, the sheriff, the protector, was gone. His dark past had finally caught up with him in a way that was too powerful to escape. The ripple effects of his actions would continue to reverberate through the community, long after the final gavel fell. The truth had been uncovered, but the cost of that truth was immeasurable. What do you think? Was Nolan a victim of his past, or was his descent into darkness inevitable? Could someone have saved him from himself, or was his fate sealed long before Arden's death? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. How does the story of Nolan Draxton make you think about the people around you? Are there hidden truths in our lives that we're too afraid to face? Share your thoughts and theories. And don't forget to subscribe for more chilling stories that will keep you questioning everything you thought you knew. Nolan Draxton's life, once filled with honor and respect, came crashing down as the truth about Arden Everly's murder spread like wildfire through Dallas. The sheriff, a man who had spent years building a reputation as a protector of the law, was now exposed as the very thing he swore to fight against. The betrayal was too much for the community to bear. The shock of it all left the people of Dallas in disbelief. How could the sheriff, the trusted figure who had once stood as a symbol of strength, be capable of such darkness? It wasn't just a murder of an innocent girl. It was a destruction of the very trust that had held the community together. Nolan's carefully crafted image was shattered beyond repair. Meanwhile, Arden's family was left in devastation. Her parents, who had always been proud of their daughter's success, now faced an unfathomable loss. They had lost not only their child, but the future they had dreamed of for her. The dreams of watching Arden thrive in her career, Her life unfolding with love and success had been brutally ripped away. The pain of losing her was a wound that would never heal. The questions left unanswered, the whys and how could this happen, would haunt them forever. No amount of justice could bring Arden back, and nothing could erase the cruelty of her untimely death. Can anyone truly escape the weight of their past? Was Nolan a victim of his own trauma, or was he simply a man who had fallen too far into the darkness? The consequences were clear. Nolan had been taken into custody, his once promising career destroyed, and his future as a lawman gone. But the real question remained, at what cost had all of this come? Could Nolan have ever escaped the grip of his childhood demons, or was he doomed from the start? As the dust settled, there were no easy answers. Nolan's life, his legacy, was forever tarnished. But the most haunting part of this story wasn't just a murder. It was the man Nolan had become. He was no longer the sheriff people had once trusted. His descent into darkness had been slow, a lifetime of emotional scars finally catching up with him in the most devastating way possible. For Nolan, there would be no redemption, no way to undo what had been done. The questions that lingered were heartbreaking. Could anyone have helped Nolan before it was too late? Could someone have recognized the signs of his unraveling? Or was he destined to spiral into madness? Had he ever truly been in control of his own fate? Or was he simply a product of his troubled past? And what about the people who trusted him, his colleagues, his friends? How could they reconcile the man they thought they knew with the monster who committed such a heinous crime? Was Nolan's fall from grace inevitable, or was it the result of a tragic series of events that could have been avoided? The case was closed, and Nolan was sentenced, but the scars of this tragedy remained, etched into the minds of everyone affected. Nolan Draxton's story was one of downfall and destruction, but it was also a cautionary tale, one that begged the question, how many people walk around every day, carrying the weight of their unresolved pain, not knowing how close they are to breaking? For Nolan, there would be no redemption. The man he once was, the sheriff, the protector, was gone. His dark past had finally caught up with him in a way that was too powerful to escape. The ripple effects of his actions would continue to reverberate through the community, long after the final gavel fell. The truth had been uncovered, but the cost of that truth was immeasurable. What do you think? Was Nolan a victim of his past, or was his descent into darkness inevitable? Could someone have saved him from himself, or was his fate sealed long before Arden's death? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. How does the story of Nolan Draxton make you think about the people around you? Are there hidden truths in our lives that we're too afraid to face? Share your thoughts and theories. And don't forget to subscribe for more chilling stories that will keep you questioning everything you thought you knew.